All right. Welcome to today's office hours, where we try to answer your questions. Today's session, we're trying to do this towards the beginning of each month. Seems like every so many sessions we go through, people just have different types of questions. And last week, I was telling Kendra earlier, last week whenever she was out, we did have a few questions pop in about some of the Zapier and ChatGPT pieces. So if we have some time, we'll do that. But for now, we've got a list of questions that have been asked, and we're going to go over those. During the session, if you have any particular questions of your own, do not be afraid to ask them. We want to make sure that we answer all your questions, get through the mundane and the challenging, and just kind of help you guys learn what Realvolve is. For those that don't know me, my name is Mark Stepp. Actually, everybody's on this right now. I think everybody does know me. But for those watching on the recordings, I've been in this space for 3 decades, just helping the real estate business with technology, helping them create a sustainable business, and understanding the why. So, Kendra?
And likewise, pretty familiar with everyone on the call today. But if you're watching this, my name is Kendra Rouse. I'm in our premium services department. Myself and our team, we work one-on-one with you to help you, understand, build, systematize, and automate your system so that you're working at your best and getting some time back in your day, hopefully.
One thing I really enjoy about Kendra, for those that don't know Kendra, you really, really need to get to know her. She is super. She is extremely aware of the technology that's out there and the things that can be automated. And I love just how she goes through and figures out ways to make things happen. So thank you, Kendra, for being inquisitive.
Yeah, thanks, Mark. And I think that often what I love about our job is that we get the opportunity to help agents that have no shortage of what they call shiny objects. And there's I don't know of any agent that wakes up and they're like, I don't have anything to do today. The feeling is, well, where do I start? What do I do? And that's exhausting. And so if I can just help kind of say, these are the best practices and this is what you can do, and survey thousands of agents and get those best practices and put software and automation in place that helps you succeed in a competitive environment and make your day a little bit easier. That's really our goal.
Very well
and then today's topic too, we do this once a month where we compile a list of questions that have been asked, commonly asked questions. If you want to email us and ask us questions, we can add them to these webinars. But really the goal is just to make sure that you're getting what you need when you need it. We're going to go over how you can get additional help and support outside of these calls. And Mark has made this slide needs to be updated, but if you go to realvolve.com/office hours, all of our previous office hours are recorded there. We do this once a week on Wednesdays at 11 o'clock Eastern. And so you can find the previous recordings, all of them listed there on our YouTube channel. So I encourage you to check that out. A lot of good information there. So as Mark was saying, there's some questions that came up about last week's webinar, and we'll go over those in addition to answering the following. What's the best way to filter for contacts without a tag? So just making sure that you have some best practices behind that. Talking about generating PDFs inside of Realvolve and what options you have there. And the best way to manage a property listing that became a transaction but has terminated. And so we'll go over kind of the flow of information there as well. So let's get to it. All right, so if I'm in Realvolve, and I think this question comes from tag management in itself is a system, right? So typically tagging best practices, we in our workflows for the most of the time manage tags through there. So if you think about the life cycle, let's just say of a seller, I'm going to typically manage my seller transactionally with a few workflows. 4 specifically is what we recommend: listing appointment, pre-MLS, active MLS into contract and close. And so when you think about tag management, we always, as best practices, whether they're a client, they're a lead, whatever else, you want to think about the transition that a seller is making in terms of the tags. Because if I want to pull a list of my active sellers, right, I should be able to do that. And we typically do it through tags. And so let's say if inside of our pre-MLS, which pre-MLS means I know that I have the business, I'm going to start this workflow so that I have a list of the things that I need to be doing prior to it going live. I may need to tag my seller with pre-MLS or, whatever it is that I know, so I can pull a list of people that are in this specific situation if I need to. Typically, when we start a active MLS workflow, then that seller themselves through that workflow is tagged with active seller. When that property closes through your contract to close, the activity itself can actually remove the active seller tag and it can add past client. So now that person has a past client tag. Additionally, when you close a seller out, we're typically starting them on our long-term nurture 10-year campaigns so that they're not forgotten. Their birthdays are celebrated, home purchase anniversaries, etc. When that workflow is started, it is tagged 10-year nurture. And so I can go in and pull a list of all the people on the nurture campaign. And so really, when you think about that, you want to start there in your tag planning, but you may find, and obviously this person has found a need to say, who are the people that do not have tags at all? And so if I'm going to come in and try to pull a list of those people, I'm going to click on my contacts. I'm going to come under filters. I'm going to create new filter. So under tags, you have a few options. You have any, all, and no. And so if I click these two things, right? So it's saying go in and check the database and see if a person has either this or this, right? So if a person has one or the other, they're going to show up on that list. All is saying, show me the people that have 10-year contact nurture and long-term buyer. You probably wouldn't have anybody that meets that criteria, but regardless, you could pull that list. And so the other option, if I wanted to find everybody that did not have a tag, I could come in here and say, show me the people that do not have any of these. So I could come in and select all of the tags that I'm currently using, and it would show me the remainder of people that do not have any of the tags that I'm currently using. I could then come in and I could give these people, if I wanted to do something with that remainder list, I could select all of them. And I could add a tag to them. So maybe that tag is no tag or needs workflow or, whatever it is. If I wanted to make sure that I addressed these people and did additional, build out on them or whatever I need to do, I could do that as well. Anything to add on that, Mark?
Yeah. That's one way of doing it, I guess. If you've got lots of tags, and you don't want to go through and tag everything, there is an option in there for under the other option. There is contacts without tags.
Yeah, that's easier, right?
Yeah, it's a lot easier.
Yeah, that works too. And to that point, if you're pulling a list of people without tags, your goal is probably to see who are those people that have kind of fall through the cracks. Who have I not done things with? And so there's other things in here that may help you as well. If you wanted to pull a list of people without email addresses, without addresses, things like that. Oftentimes I see people that are sending out a newsletter monthly. And when you send out your newsletter in a blast format, you may find on your dashboard a record or where it says, we couldn't send this to these people because we don't have email addresses for them. And so that's one way to kind of catch that you're not doing that. But, proactively, you could be going in and pulling a list of people without email addresses to kind of see. And you can stack these tags too, right? So specifically with this situation that I was just referring to, if I came in here and I said, okay, well, who doesn't have an email address and they're tagged with newsletter, right? So this is telling me and I've got 5, so this is, you can add them on top of each other. So if you have newsletter without an email address, that's probably a place to start in terms of database cleanup. There's a lot of things that can be done with these filters to just make sure that your data is as clean as possible. And so definitely encourage you to take a look at that.
Yeah, I think there's a time frame right now where business is slower than normal. Of course, the market's kind of weird anyway, but there's a lot of people are spending their time away from the actual business, and what you can do is use this time effectively to clean up and make sure that your database is where it needs to be. And we've got lots of different options for doing different things, but just doing general cleanup and getting rid of the people that are in your database that they moved away, you're not going to do anything with them, or God forbid they've died. Dealing with those, I was looking through some database things of mine. Is like, well, we've got some people that are just no longer with us. So cleaning those out, doing some general maintenance is really good.
Yeah. And, with that too, and just taking your example a little bit further on what I would do with that, if somebody had passed away, I'm going to go ahead and use myself as an example. I typically would not advise, I know I just, I just killed myself. If somebody had passed away, I would not suggest deleting them out of your database, because if you think about it, that person is going probably attached to previous listings, previous transactions, things like that. They're filed in your database from previous transactional history. So if you just delete them out, then they're not going to be tied to that record anymore. And so what you can do, if you come down inside of any record under contact to record details, you can deactivate a person. And so, if you pull a list or export a list, this is going to prevent them from being included and things like that. And that would still maintain that record, but kind of put it on there that they are inactive. Anything else you'd do on that, Mark?
Well, whenever I said delete, I was thinking deleting the tag from that record, but you're right. The other thing that in that specific situation is, if you go up to the relationship section, if you have a person that does have a relationship, they were married to somebody, and now they are deceased, mark it as deceased there. That way it still retains the link to the relationship, but at least that the connectivity is broken there. So
for sure. And I don't know what the thought process was behind it's complicated, but this is my favorite relationship status, and I hope you all are using it. All right. So on to our next question, which is behind generating PDFs inside of Realvolve. So PDFs can be generated a couple different ways. And so the PDFs are generated from templates under contacts. And so if I went into a property or transaction, I could not generate a PDF. Mark, can you give us some insight into where that is or why that is, or some thought process behind why you can only do that in contacts?
It's on the list to do the other two, and just have not gotten to it on the list, honestly.
Gotcha. So if I'll give you an example. If I was doing a mailer, okay, I don't want to spend the time to go in and individually put in, hi Bob, hi Sally, hi whoever it is, right? Some of those things that are going to be specific to that contact record can be automated inside of my templates. And so any of my templates can technically be turned into a PDF, and you can utilize some of your merge fields. And so if I go into a couple ways to do this, I can do this in mass, and I'll show you how to do that. But the first thing I'm going to do is create the thing that I want to be turned into a PDF as a template. Once I've done that, then I'm either going to access the individual contact record where I'm trying to generate that PDF, or I'm going to pull a list of those people, and we'll go over that. And I'm going to click on this icon that says PDF. Once I do that, it's going to ask me, what do you want to turn into a PDF? And so our newsletter might look okay as a PDF. So I'm going to take whatever it is that I want, and it's going to show me a few things at the bottom. And I'm going to click create PDF. I could show preview if I wanted to do that. And so as I do that, it's going to generate that PDF file for me and open up a, well, the newsletter might not be good.
Yeah. The newsletters are really HTML based, a lot more format. So I'm not sure that is a great idea.
Huh. Okay. Well, let's just say it's an email, anything else, you can do this. Click either show preview or create PDF. Mark, when you generate this PDF, it will file itself, correct?
Yes. So what happens is if you're doing it as an individual message to somebody and you create the PDF, it will create the PDF, allow you to download it. It'll also create it in the files tab as a PDF for you so that it's stored there so you can have access to it in the, in the future. The real advantage of this particular one is, if you want to send out letters, snail mail type content to people, being able to do it to several people. One big feature that's in this is if you are doing multiple contacts. So if you do the view all and you select multiple people, it will create one big document with all the PDFs for each individual person all in one. So you can just do one big print job. But at the same time, it also breaks up each of those separate sections and files them away in the files tab, given that you've checked the options down below. So there's a, save file. So if you want to save it to each individual person, you can certainly do that.
Now, can you think of a time you would use this create PDF and save as template? Is the premise behind this where I have generated this thing that I want to create as a PDF, but I did not start it as a template?
Correct.
Okay.
Or you've gone in and you've made changes to it and you want to, save it back as the template.
Got it. And as you can see here, I went in and I pulled a list of the people. I selected everyone and I clicked on that icon for PDF. And so as you can see here, as Mark was saying, this is going to generate that document now for 20 different people. It's going to go into each individual contact records information, and it's going to use the merge fields specific. This one doesn't really have merge fields, but it's going to use the merge fields specific for each individual person.
Dear Mary, dear Sam.
Now, when you download that, Mark, will it file itself under the settings for your downloads?
Yes. So whenever you go into the settings section, once it's generated, once it's created, and you go under the printed PDF option, it doesn't look like you've actually created any. It'll give you a list there. And in that list, then you'll be able to go through and see, download, and use those however you want.
Yeah, perfect. Anyone have any questions on that?
Hey, this is Bobby. I do have a question. Will it also send that PDF through an email on this one step, or is that another step?
That would be a separate step. We don't have it built in as an attachment to an email. It's a good question. Not that we couldn't do it, but it doesn't currently do that. No.
Good question, Bobby. Any other questions?
I'm going to put that on my list, though.
Yeah, that's good. There's some thought behind that. There could be use cases anyway. All right. And then
the one challenge you have, sending an email with an attachment is, how many people are going to open those attachments? There are just so many viruses and people have been so inundated with, don't open attachments unless you know the person. Well, even if you know the person, it's very possible that they had gotten hacked and, sending out stuff that isn't there. So you've got to be really careful. So what I typically tell people is, if you're going to be creating something, created it so that it shows right in the body of the message, and that's why most people get the emails. But if you're going to create like a PDF newsletter, put that on your website, send them the link to it, because a lot of times those PDFs get extremely large and it just slows down the sending of the email. And you've probably seen where you've got appraisals with photos and all kinds of stuff that get extremely large. So you're really better off putting those types of things on a server, in a holding on your Google Drive, whatever, and then just sending them the share link to that file so that they can access it.
Well, we've also seen some links that, unless you know specifically the validity of that link, don't click on them. So that's why we came across a good article recently that Jody wants to send out, and this was a great way of thinking about how to get that out there. But yeah, we're looking into it. We're researching.
I'd be interested in that link information.
And the last thing that I wanted to go over before we let Mark answer some of the questions from last week is kind of just going over best practices. There was some questions about, if I have my listing and it goes under contract, that listing fell through, what are the best practices behind that? And everybody on this call should have canceled transaction workflow. We'll give that away today if you're on this webinar at the end of this call. If you don't have it, we'll make sure that you have that in your account, because it's something you should be using. So let's think about the process on how this could happen. Okay, so I have listed a property, in this case, Main Street. I have started my pre-MLS, which turned into active MLS. I marketed this property and it went under contract. And so when I take something under contract, instead of reinventing the wheel, I don't need to come in and click on copy and then start a transaction. I can actually tell Realvolve, hey, take this listing, turn it into a transaction. And what triggers that change is changing the status of this listing from active to pending. As soon as I do that, it's going to pop up a box and say, hey, you want to create a transaction? Your two options are yes and copy files, and no. No is essentially cancel. Yes and copy files says, hey, take anything that was part of this, that was filed as part of this listing, and copy it over to the transaction. Let everything live there. If I just click yes, you're telling the system to let those files live separately. Let the listing documents live in the listing, and then any new transaction documents I'll file under the transaction. So I'm going to probably click yes and copy files, or whatever decision you make on that. And then once I do that, I'm probably going to come in here and launch my contract to close workflow, buyer contract to close, seller contract to close, buyer and seller contract to close. And I'm going to run whatever contract to close workflow works best for the situation. So during that running of that contract, or that workflow, if this falls through, the first thing that I need to do is stop the workflow. And so I can access my workflow activities by clicking on this activities tab and then incomplete. That's going to show me a list of anything that I still have to do on this transaction. So let me show you an example. So the first thing that I'm going to want to do is stop the workflow that I'm currently running. And again, I'm going to do that by accessing an activity that is inside of, here's an example, that is inside of this specific transaction. All right, so again, I'm inside of the transaction, I'm under the activities, I'm under incomplete. I can see here, it's giving me the name of this workflow. I'm running buyer contract to close on Super Awesome Street. So I'm going to go to any of these activities, probably the next one, and I'm going to stop it. And so when I stop it, I have built my workflow, ideally, my contract to close workflow, with what we call alternative workflows, meaning that if you stop this workflow, the system inherently knows, hey, what do you probably want to do next? And if you are stopping a workflow transactionally, you probably are starting canceled transaction workflow. And so I'm going to click this X on any activity, and I'm going to select one of these options. Delete this activity is just going to delete this specific activity. Delete all is going to delete anything that's still to be done, but it's also going to delete the things that you've already completed, and you won't have record of things that you complete. And so, probably you're not going to use that option if in a normal situation, because I probably would want to keep record of the things that I had already done. And then delete all remaining is going to stop anything that is still to be done. Now, do you see how it popped up this box and it said, hey, do you want to start canceled transaction? And that's it's anticipating my next step. And so, yes, I do. And so I'm going to start this. And the way that we have set this up is you have a few groups. And if you're not familiar with groups, groups are saying, hey, these things may or may not apply. And so tell us what is right in this specific situation. And so if you think about it in the terms of a transaction, there may be instances where I represent the seller, I represent the buyer, I represent the seller and the buyer, and I'm going to be doing different things depending on who I represent, okay? So like, let's take this as an example. This activity is grouped under seller because it's updating the status of the MLS to active. If I just represent the buyer, I don't care about that activity, but it's something I definitely need to be doing if it applies. And so as you can see here, if I deselect it, telling the system I do not represent the seller, it's going to say, hey, then you don't need to do that activity. So I'm going to select and deselect what matters or what groups. I'm going to assign who should be assigned to this role. In this case, by default, all of the tasks in canceled transaction are assigned to the transaction coordinator. And I can show you how we build the transaction that you can change that. So maybe some of the activities, the responsibility of the agent and the transaction coordinator, just the agent, you get to make all those decisions. But right now we're saying all of these activities that need to be done should your transaction fall through, the transaction coordinator can do them. And so you just have to tell the system, well, who is that transaction coordinator? And so if you have a team of people, it's going to give you a drop down. You're going to select who should be doing this role and hit next. On the left here is what information the system needs to operate this workflow. In this case, the start date, it's going to default to today's date. That is then going to in turn or assign dates to the activities over here. I don't really need to do or change anything on this. Hit next. And then over here on the left is telling me that this is the people that this workflow may be communicating with. And so it gives me the opportunity to input that information here. And so maybe I'm the seller agent. And so I'm going to search and find myself. I might not be in this account. And if this contact is already in the system, then we'll have them to select from. Once I've filled in who I can fill in, I'm going to hit done. When you see done, that's going to launch the workflow. So essentially, cancel transaction should be doing anything that you need to do to get this property back on the market. I get this question a lot. Think about the funnel, right? I have everything in Realvolve is broken down, contacts, properties, transaction. I created a property. I threw it over to a transaction. That transaction fell through. And so I need to get it back over to a property. So one of the questions I get a lot is, well, what happens the next loop? What happens when that property goes back under contract? Do I use that same transaction? And we actually teach that you don't. And the reason for that is because I want to maintain previous record history on that transaction. So when I go back through that loop, meaning one of the things that the cancel transaction workflow is going to tell you to do is to go back over to your property, change it back to active, and relaunch your workflow. So if you think about how we got that initial one over to a transaction, we're going to do that again the second time around. So inside of your property, changing it from active back to pending a second time, you're going to get that same box again. And it's going to say, hey, do you want to create a transaction? And you're going to say, yes, I do. When you say yes, it is going to create a new transaction and leave that old transaction information there, but we've stopped the workflow. And one of the things that your canceled transaction workflow should be telling you to do is to change this from pending to fell through or terminated or canceled, or, whatever it is that you've decided that is applicable in this specific situation. And so I'm going to cancel this out, and I'm going to follow the steps on my workflow. So as you can see here, I'm going to change my transaction status to canceled. Nailed it. The next thing I'm probably going to want to do is get a mutual release. This is called different things in different areas, but you need to deal probably with earnest money and getting whatever paperwork signed so that actual transaction is agreed upon on all parties to cancel it, and whatever paperwork needs to be done. And so as you can see, this activity has a checklist. So if I click here, it's telling me what I can do. So it's making sure that I've stopped this workflow. Now, the reason this is here is you can start canceled transaction two different ways. One is I go into my transaction and I see that I have activities running. If I click on the X and I say, hey, stop this workflow, because I have it set up with an alternative workflow, that box popped up and it said, hey, do you want to start canceled transaction? The other alternative that I could do is I could just go into my transaction and I could just launch canceled transaction workflow. If I did that, the system doesn't inherently know that my transaction is canceled, and there's a potential that I could still have my contract to close workflow running. And so this is kind of a fail safe. Hey, did you make sure that you stopped that extra workflow, that you're not still doing transaction stuff? And so I know I did this because of the way that I started this workflow. And this is making sure that, hey, did I get both sides to sign whatever termination paperwork that I have?
Hey, Kendra, is there a reason why you wouldn't make that into an action so that it would cancel it through the action?
I think the newer version of this
it would stop the workflow itself through the action.
No, but I can check into that.
Yeah.
Make a note of that.
Built in as one of the action capabilities is to either start or stop workflows. So the purpose of that would be if whether you've got checklists completed or incomplete, I mean, you can choose which one you want to do, but once you've got the two signatures, then you could have an action that automatically gets run that says, delete, stop these particular potential workflows. But there may be a reason why you're not doing it. I don't want to force you to do something, but
yeah, I'll check with Lisa on that and see if that was built out. But let's talk about that. So I'm in the back end, and you can access your workflows by clicking on workflow up here at the top. Again, at the end of this webinar, if you don't already have this workflow, we'll give it to you. But I just typed in canceled because I wanted to find this. It's called canceled transaction. So I'm going to click on it, and I'm going to come down here. There's 7 steps in here. If you need to customize this, change it for your specific situation. And so I can access or edit any of these activities through here. And so let's just take a look at what Mark is saying. So this activity right here, I'm going to click on the pencil if I want to open up or change anything. If I were to switch this or change this out, right, it's going to entail me getting rid of these 2 activities. And I'm going to come over here, and I'm essentially what Mark is saying is, hey, tell the activity to do it for you. And so I'm going to say cancel any transaction workflows. And then I'm going to come down here to where it says stop and start workflows. And I'm going to pick one of these options. I could start a new workflow, not applicable in this situation. Now, when it says start a new workflow, it's saying start a new workflow on this transaction. Same way with stop a workflow. It's saying stop a workflow on this transaction. The difference here between stop a workflow for a linked property and stop workflows is you're telling it where to manipulate the workflow. So stop workflow says, hey, do it on the transaction that we're in right now. And stop workflows for linked property says, go over to that linked property where we were listing it and stop it there. You're probably going to use this for things like, hey, I just started a contract to close workflow. I don't want to run active MLS anymore. In this situation, I want to make sure that I'm not running any contract to close workflows. And so I'm going to come in and I'm going to stop workflows. I have a couple options. I could stop all workflows, which says, look at this transaction, and if anything's running on it, stop it. This might work, but you want to be really careful here. If you have any other any other workflows period running, it's not going to know just go in there and stop the contract to close. It's going to say if there's any workflows running at all in this transaction, stop them. And so really be careful, especially in contract workflows or contact workflows, because your contact potentially could have 2 or 3 workflows running on them, and you could very easily just stop anything running on them. So be careful with that if that's your intention. And so in this case, I want to say, I want to stop my buyer contract to close. I want to stop my seller contract to close. I may have a buyer and seller, whatever it is that I potentially could be running to manage my contract to close. It's telling the system, go in there and see if these things are actually running. If they are, then stop them. If I select it to run it automatically, this will not run automatically anytime there are checklist items to be done. And so you want to pay attention to that. And then I'm going to hit save. And now essentially that the system can, by you running this action, stop workflows for you.
Yeah. And it won't, because it's based off of a complete checklist. It'll first ask you, do you have the buyer signed? Do you have the seller signed? Once those 2 checklist options are checked, then that action becomes available. Cancel any transaction workflows. And that just would save you, a couple steps of going out and doing it. If it's not there, it won't hurt. I mean, if they're not running, nothing is going to change. But if they are running, it'll automatically remove it. So it just saves you a few steps.
Right. And that's why we put in there, cancel the buy side and the sell side, because the system's smart enough to say, well, if one's there and the other's not there, then just overlook the one that isn't there.
So Kendra, can I ask you a question?
Of course.
So when it's back on the market
and
that box comes up on the property files, do you want to, if you get it's back on the market and say you get another offer, or it's just active, it's back on the market, and you want to share the property files, right? Will they be in both places then? Still on that transaction that fell through, and on the pending or the new one that's coming?
Yes. Okay. Yeah. So if you're in a property and you change your status from active to pending, and that box pops up that says, what do you want to do with the files? And you click yes and copy files. Every time you do that and create a new transaction, it's going to throw whatever files are in the system at that time over to that transaction. And they'll essentially live in 2 places under transaction at that point, which is probably what I would do. Any other questions on that? Okay, well, for the sake of time, because I could go on for hours about who knows what. Mark, you have your some questions that came up from last week's webinar?
Yeah, I can go over that. Just want to make sure if there's any other participant questions that we can go over, but absolutely, I can do that. Let me share my screen. Okay, so in last week's episode, we talked about creating the different types of social media posts and doing things with social media. And then at the very end, I brought up the thing, well, if you wanted to take this one step further, you can simply create a workflow with an action to send a webhook. So this is the workflow that we created. Basically, it's just a Facebook post with AI webhook in Zapier. So during this presentation piece, we created the activity, created the post, and showed that the webhook address right here was placed into the system. Now, one person said, I didn't understand where that came from. So want to make sure that that's covered. So whenever you're in your Zaps, this is the one that we were working with. If you come into your Zap, actually, I need to edit it to actually see it. No, actually, right here it is. Whenever you do a catch webhook, catch raw webhook, whatever, either one of those, they will give you a webhook URL. It's something that's generated by Zapier as an address. So it'll be a long address of stuff. You just copy that, go back into your Realvolve account and paste that in. So that basically makes the connection between Realvolve, the action that you want to do with Realvolve, and sending some piece of data to Zapier. And it comes from that step. If you're in the edit option, let me just go ahead and click on there. The trigger itself is the webhook. If you come down here to continue, right here, it'll tell you what it is as well. So you can just copy that. So it's the same place. If you're actually editing, it's right here. If you're doing the viewing section, it was in that previous one. But it's just a matter of making sure that you get that into the Realvolve webhook so that it makes that connection. So that was one question that was had. So I hope that was good. The other question, so during the presentation, I also said, hey, I'll make this available to you so that all you have to do is copy that. You can share Zaps. And I said I would make a link to the share. So whenever you're in our realvolve.com/office hours, the most recent item that is on the list, on the playlist itself, will be showing here. So this was actually the one from last week. And so if you're viewing this in the history, it's not going to be the one that you see. What you can do is come up here to the list, find the one that you want, and you can go to it and it'll start playing. Well, whenever it starts playing, it's playing it locally. One thing that I did was, if you go and view it in YouTube, because there's kind of some more stuff, so you can just click on the little YouTube for this video, it will take you then to the video itself. But down here at the bottom in the description section, I added a few things to the description that can be super useful for you guys. Number one is the share prompt. So I took this, I shared it so that it can be shared with other people. All you have to do is click on it. It's going to give you the basic information of what this is. And actually, since I'm the creator of it, it's coming up as if I'm going to edit it, but you would have a link there to actually use it. So it would come into this preview mode right here. So Realvolve activity webhook, do you want to use this or whatever? And it's basically showing you the steps that it uses, kind of explaining what it's doing. And you can actually try this Zap, and it will copy my Zap, this Zap right here, into yours. And my understanding was it would fill in anything that was set up. However, like all things problematic, evidently they did not copy over the prompt. So the question came in as like, my prompt's empty. How do what do I put in there? So whenever you're editing your Zap itself, coming to this prompt area, there is an action area here. And this part right here is what was blank. Now, I tried a couple different ways of just copying this and pasting it, seeing if I can make it available, and it wasn't. It didn't do real well. And this is in a JSON format. A lot of people don't understand what all it's saying there. So what I did is, in this office hours piece, I gave you guys access to last week's slides as well. And in those slides, I added an extra page that basically gave you the prompt. That gave you the prompt. You can just copy this entire prompt, including the fields, and I took it out of the JSON format. It wasn't necessary. It's just a matter of, I want to make sure that I get the content. So each one of these little field pieces right here should be coming from merge fields. So the only downside to copying and pasting it in here is you will need to go in there, click into the field, and add the merge field that is available for that particular field. A lot of steps there. I don't know that everybody wants to do this or anybody wants to do this necessarily, but if you really want to, and if you're understanding how to add in merge fields to a field in Zapier, it's the same way for everything. But what I'm doing here is I'm just creating it as a plain text message saying, okay, the MLS number is this, and then this is where the merge field would go. The property type is this, and this is the merge field for property type. Actually, probably shouldn't have that, but each one of these are the merge fields that identify what needs to go in there. By doing this, whenever the Zap is run, Realvolve sends the webhook as part of the action. It takes the property information as part of the input and uses this prompt that says create 7 new listing style Facebook posts with emojis and hashtags, and then use the information below. I did change this so that instead of saying use the JSON, use the property information below, and it fills it in. There's no difference. But what happens then is it takes that information, Zapier, or excuse me, OpenAI will then do the prompt. It'll create the 7 posts, and then my third step here is to create the content in a Google Doc. And in that Google Doc, the action on this is to create a document. Actually, the action itself was create document from text. So it knows it's going to create a Google Doc from some text, the text coming from the OpenAI. And then the name of that document is just OpenAI Facebook post 4, and then I use a merge field for the address and the MLS number just to keep them together. And then the contents of that document is going to be whatever came from the response in step 2. So I'm grabbing content from step 1, the merge fields, and putting that into that. But once I generate the content, I'm putting that into the body of the document and then sending it on through. And then one of the questions came back during the session was, can I then turn around and send that document or the contents of that back to my Realvolve account? And it's like, well, yeah, because we do have an email by Zapier. We can send it by email. And one of the things that we have is our Dropbox email address inside of the data that's coming in. It knows which property it came from or which transaction it came from if you're doing it from a transaction. In this case, we're doing it from a property, but it knows the property Dropbox address so that we can send that same response as a email with a subject of social media posts. Who's it coming from? You put in your name and who it's from, and then continue on. So what happened then is once that is run, let me go back to, I think we were using, no, this one. Social media post right here. It created all the social media posts themselves as comments. So very powerful. OpenAI just released a bunch of new features. If you guys are not using OpenAI for anything, or ChatGPT for things that you're doing, you need to seriously consider looking into it. I know it's technology. You don't necessarily want to learn it, but if you don't, everybody else is, and you're going to be left behind. So just a
Yeah, and I mean, to that point, I would say, obviously that's what the whole reason our premium services department is here, is to make sure that if you need help with these things, right? Different things need to happen in different orders. Okay. If you don't conceptually understand at the very beginning that these are the processes that I have within these processes, every time this happens, I want to do this. Because to me, the posting on the social media happens at certain things that live inside of my workflow, right? So one, do I even have a step inside of my current process that tells me that I need to be posting a just listed or a just sold? Do I have that kind of workflow every time I go under contract? Am I running my contract to close? You need to start at the basics, right? This is MBA level stuff. And if you're not at MBA level, that's okay, right? You don't give an MBA level course to somebody that's in 5th grade. And that's okay. We have to go to 5th grade. We have to go to middle school. We have to go to high school before you do that. So if you're not at this point, then you table it as I want to do this in the future. And you take a step back and build out the core first, because the core is what's going to make you money. And this is what's going to take a 20-minute task down to a 3-minute task. But none of this matters unless you have your basics in place.
Absolutely. Yeah. Spot on. So
we've only got about 6 minutes left, but any questions on this or anything else that you guys are needing right now?
I have a question that's not actually related to this. In the property, in a property record, you have the important dates. And is there an ability to add additional items that are not predefined by Realvolve? The best example I can come up with is in Washington State. We do a preliminary title search prior to the listing going active. And it's done very early on. And we don't have any way of recording that right now because the title or the title report is actually in the transaction record in Realvolve at this point.
Do we not have a field in property, Mark, that addresses that already? I feel like we have something that addresses.
Yeah, it's a great question. Here's the thing. We do require Realvolve's knowledge of dates because of the way we share dates and stuff. If you go into your settings, go into set default fields, there's a section for default fields for properties and for transactions, right, of which we've got some different sections. There is a date field, and we've got a ton of different dates that are available.
Yes, we use some of those.
Yeah, if it's not in this list, you can submit a request for us to add it, but we do have to add it, and it's something we do periodically add, additional fields. So, certainly let us know your need, and we can get that added in there. It's not something you can just go in there and add yourself because of our library of fields that we have. A library of workflows and templates that we have. If somebody was to create, say, a measurements date instead of measurement date, they use that, and now they share that. Somebody else gets it. Now they got 2 different dates. We're just trying to manage some of the tonality or the wording of things. But if you're missing a date that you need, certainly let us know. We can get that added.
Okay, we'll
Hey,
do
Mark.
that.
Mark, I'm glad he asked this question. This is Bobby. This came up a couple times this year where we had a property, a listing that had an expiration date that was beyond the sale date. Okay. So we get these pop-ups. You have a listing is going to be expired. So recently I've gone into the property record and changed the listing expiration date to the closing date because it's no longer, our response. It's gone. We sold it. Is that right? Or is it, and the second question, why couldn't that be automated? That if you have a property listing that did not fall through, it actually was a completed sale, that the closing date could be carried over to the property record as the listing expiration date.
Excellent question. Number one, certainly creating that as a task in a workflow to get it manually done, you can do. I will see if we can get our engineers to put that on the list to just do it. That makes complete sense to me. Why we didn't do it, I'm not sure.
Thank you.
Yep.
Okay, I have one other question, Mark. We've got a good library of templates, and we use the greeting field at the top of every one of them, if they're emails, outbound emails. And the greeting field works fine when you're doing it when it's being triggered by a workflow. But if one of our brokers goes in and selects randomly a name that they want to send out an email, say, what to do in a power outage or something like that, some kind of promotional thing, and they trigger it through the box in the upper right of that person's record, the greeting field does not fill in their name. It stays as greeting. Is that expected behavior or something?
No, that would not be expected. So hang on a second. So basically, we're in a contact here. Let me go to me. I don't have an email in this one. Let me do mark@realvolve.com. Up here,
We just pick a template. Yeah.
Select any template, but it should have greeting in here. Contact greeting. Oh. I wonder. No, this is hello, Mark. I was going to say it would be a bug, but I mean, if it's using greeting, it just greeting like that. If it's using something else, there is a contact greeting. Let me just see if it's doing the same thing. Hello, Mark. I am not confident. If you can send me kind of the contact and the template that's being used on that for your account, maybe I can take a look at it and see. I have seen cases where the merge field itself is a little bit off. They've gone in there, misspelled it, or there's some extra controls or something in there. I mean, you can go into the source and you can see what this looks like. I mean, this is, you guys don't need to be necessarily going in here, but whenever you're looking at the source of things, sometimes the greeting field can have special characters or something in there, which throws off the merge field capabilities. So it could be an individual template, but if it's a standard template, it should be doing
Yeah.
it.
I'm doing it right now. What I can do is do a 10-second video of showing and send that
Perfect.
to you.
Yeah. Send me a video, Mark at realvolve.com, and I'll certainly take a look at it and see what.
Okay. Thank you, Mark.
Yep. Any other questions? All right. Well, guys, thank you so much. We've got another session next week. We will be taking off Thanksgiving weekend, so we won't have classes during that time frame. But we've got few weeks for that. On what else did we have? Premium services. We kind of talked about that. Preparing for 2024 will be our next office hours next week. So look forward to having you guys there. We'll go through and just talk about what we need to do to get everything ready for the following year. Make sure that you guys are successful in what you're doing. So stop focusing on the noise, and my systems need systems, all of which are some good topics, and we'll be diving into those. If you guys have any other questions, certainly reach out to our support team. We'll be happy to answer whatever questions you've got. Bye, everyone.